Please be advised that this recorded webinar has been edited from its original format, which may have included a product demo. To set up a live demo or to request more information, please complete the form to the right. Or if you are currently not on CSC Global, there is a link to the website in the description of this video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Industry Updates webinar, Online Fraud, How to Stay Ahead. My name is Tariq Hopkins, and I'll be your moderator. Joining us today is Fernando Ceballos, who is a Global Anti-Fraud Product Manager for CSC. And with that, let's welcome Fernando.
Thank you very much, Tariq, for the introduction. So today we will cover what are the online fraud emerging trends. We're going to look at some of the most notorious trends that are targeting online organizations. We're also going to look at the common threat vectors, and then we're going to go over the holistic fraud protection programs of using an external anti-fraud experts. "2020 was a very interesting year, not only because of the pandemic and the effects of it, but also because one of the very interesting things that happened in 2020 was that a lot of people started working from home. This was a common trend for the majority of organizations that allowed or have the capability to allow their employees to work from home. And so there's a lot of people that started, working from their house. They no longer went to the offices, and they relied solely on the connection to their offices via the internet. This triggered a massive increase in the amount of online fraud. So we can see on the graph, we can tell that in 2020, as compared to 2019, there was a large increase in the amount of online fraud. We can see some months that went all the way to over 400% in the increase of phishing trends. And what this tells us is that scammers are aware of the vulnerabilities that the working from home represents, and we need to be able to combat that, detect those attacks, and also understand how they're going to attack our organizations so that we can prevent fraud from happening to us. Based on the numbers published for 2020 by the APWG, we can tell that one of the most prominent threat vectors that grew on 2020 was the business email compromise. This business email compromise is a type of scam that relies on the weakest link, which is the human being and the human trust. And in psychology, we can see that trust is the believing that a person is going to do something that we expect them to do. So these scammers prey on these fact of humans, and they want to request your help. They want to seem as if they are in a uncomfortable position, so they request your help for you to do something. Typically, this information about how they can identify who to target, who to go after, typically relies on their ability to identify this information. There's several organizations that they make publicly available, who is on their payroll staff, who is the one that does their payment processing internal, and who they do business with, or which products they commonly consume. And this information is utilized by scammers. Now, I'm not telling you to go and immediately delete your online presence and on all social media, but be conscious that that's some of the resources that scammers utilize. Also, if you have your hierarchy shown on your website, they will immediately know who is the boss of the account and invoice for payment, so they utilize that information to their advantage. We need to make sure that we recognize that scammers are no longer people just on their basement, trying to do some malicious things. Scammers nowadays, they are part of sophisticated criminal organizations, and they do their due diligence before they attack. Typically, what happens before the attack is that they analyze an organization, they see where are their weaknesses, they see who is the person or the people that work internally and that can be targeted, and then they proceed with a very meticulous modus operandi. Initially, what they will do is that they will test the ability for your organization to respond. Typically, they will do a small test scenario, and depending on those results, they will come back. So in order for us to understand what is the business email compromise, we need to understand how it works. Scammers typically identify one individual inside of the organization who they're going to target. That's why they utilize these targeted attacks. They send one email to one individual trying to make them fall for the scam. Typically, they will try to impersonate a person that is an internal staff member. It could be, a CEO, a manager, a head of a division, and then they will request for some type of information or some type of money exchange based on some critical situations. The scammers utilize all of the known techniques in the book, and they use sophisticated scam techniques to try to confuse the victim. These type of techniques, they involve or they include the typical payment overdue notices, emergency payments, people in distress situations, outstanding contractual obligations, or even payroll diversions. They will try to tell you, hey, this is Fernando from such and such. I have a problem with my bank. Please help me redirect the funds for my paycheck to these new accounts. That is the type of conversation that happens between the scammer and the victim. And this is something that we are well aware of, and we know how these scams function. The vast majority, also to notice, the vast majority of these scams are perfectly timed to coincide with the major holiday or business travel. It is well known that, if you announce that there is going to be this large conference that you're going with several of your employees, scams typically happen the day before, and they, for example, a CEO can send an email, an impersonating CEO can send an email to the accounting department and say, hey, I need you to give me with some gift cards just to share with the team on this business trip. And that's when the scam happens, right? They make you purchase some gift cards and send them the serial numbers. So that's typically one of the methods that they use, and all of these methods involve the purchase or the usage of a domain name that is very close to the real domain name that it's being used by the organization. I'll go into a little bit more detail into how that is done, but just I wanted to mention that that's how it's done as a business email compromise. Additionally to understanding how the scam works, we also need to understand how the money flows, how they make the money flow from your institution to the ending bank accounts or the scammer accounts. So typically what happens is that they will request for you to do a payment of an invoice. They will ask you to change where you send your payments for certain products. They will ask, as mentioned before, they will ask you to purchase some gift cards. And also what they can do is that they can ask you to upload or share internal information that is very important or financially, meaning, your banking routing numbers, your bank accounts, who is the person in charge of those accounts. All of that information is how they steal the money from the targeted organizations. So once we understand how the BEC scam can occur, we also need to understand how the money flows after the scam happens. So one of the most utilized methods for scammers is the bank transfer. That's how they will request for you to make a payment of an invoice or make the change on the payroll or pay an overdue contract. They will give you the money and the details about a bank institution or a bank account. That's where they will ask you to do the transference of money. Another one that they utilize is the purchase of gift cards. When they ask you to purchase a gift card, it's typically because, once you have a gift card, you can go and spend it anywhere and nobody knows who spent it. So that's one of the reasons why gift cards are used. Typically, one of the things that also happens is that once they purchase gift cards, what they will do next is that they will go online and purchase cryptocurrencies. And that's how they attempt to lose track of where the money went. Once you put the money into the cryptocurrency, there is something inside of the cryptocurrency world that is called a mixer. That is where you send money in and nobody knows how the money went out. It's designed inside of the cryptocurrency world specifically to lose track of how the money was spent and who sent it and where they sent it. So that's something that we also need to keep in mind. That is part of these BEC scams. And then one thing also to keep in mind is that once the scam is noticed by the institution, by the target institution or the victim, the money is long gone. There is nothing that you can do after they have stolen your money and put it into cryptocurrency. So keep in mind that by the time the institution finds out about the scam, the money is completely gone. So now that we understand how they work and how the money flows, we need to understand what is the impact of a BEC scam. In 2020, the FBI received 19,369 BEC scam complaints. This translated into adjusted losses of $1.8 billion in losses for institutions. This is a huge number if you compare it to any other type of scam. And this it's a scam that is raising the alert on several fronts, even on the law enforcement agencies. The typical average amount that is stolen on a single transaction, and this is when they ask you to pay for an invoice, they ask you to do an overdue payment for something that was pending for the institution. Typically, they steal anywhere between $48,000 and $75,000 per transaction. That means that if someone gets hit by one of these scams, typically it's around this number, and that's a very scary number if you ask me. I wouldn't want to be the one responsible for the loss of that amount of money. And then also we mentioned gift cards, and here is something interesting. For gift cards, they go for a lower amount. They typically go for an amount of around $1,000, $1,200, and this is because they understand that if you, as an organization, try to purchase these type of items, the 1,200 mark, it's the safe number where it will not raise any eyebrows. You will need to ask for too many internal approvals. So that's why they try to stay within that amount of money to stay under the radar to avoid detection. So this is slide, I'm going to briefly show you how the scam happens. Typically, as an email will get received by the victim, and the message will be something very, very casual, very kind of like trying to sound as if there is no hurry, no urgency, depending on the message that wants to be delivered. So, for example, on this slide, the email says, "Hey, I hope that you're keeping safe. I need you to set up a wire payment for a COVID medical support. And this is the amount. Let me know how this can be done. Let me advise if I can forward you the beneficiary details over." That simple message triggers the urgency on the accounts payable department or the person in that department, because they understand that the current event is that we are in a pandemic. We are doing everything possible inside our organization to try to prevent our people from getting infected. And these might be just one of the things that we're doing for COVID. And I'm just not aware of it. But, because it came from my manager or my manager's manager, then I must act upon it right away. Like I mentioned before, this typically happens, right before people go on holiday, right before Friday afternoon when no one's paying attention, and you just want to, you're counting the minutes before you can go home, and that's when these emails get to your inbox. You want to process them as fast as you can, and then you forget to check that the email didn't come from a trusted or the real email addresses or the real domain names that are part of our organization. In this example, if you see the screen, it's telling you that the email came from cscgl0bal.com. This is trying to impersonate the real domain name, which is CSC Global, for our example. And what that causes is that the target of the email is not going to pay attention to it. Typically, when this is done, right before you go home or you go on a holiday, you're not paying attention to these details, right? If this is a new domain name that was just purchased and that they are trying to use for this scam, most likely this will not get picked up by the spam traps. So this is not flagged yet, and that's when the email comes in through your email filtering techniques. It's getting to the victim, it's conveying the message, and it's waiting for the victim to reply. Once the reply happens, the next thing that will occur is that they will tell you, these are the beneficiary. For example, for this example, this is the person where you need to send the payment to. They will facilitate the bank information, and you go ahead and you send the payment for this invoice or for this supplies that the email is speaking about. Because it's right before the weekend, it's right before the holiday, by the time that these people understand that they were scammed, too many days will have gone by. The money will have cleared, and on the ending part of the scam on the bank account, and the money will be gone. So this is something that represents how the scam typically happens on a real-world example. So now that we understand what is a PSC scam, how it happens, how the money is stolen, and what are the methods used on the scam, we want to know how you can protect your organization. And to do this, we need to create a 360-degree shield that includes the secure domain management, the early detection of these type of domain names, and the prompt mitigation of the problem. This means that you want to be ahead of the scammer, meaning that the moment that they register a domain, you want to be aware of it, and also start doing the due diligence to remove that threat to your organization. This includes getting rid of the domain, but also this includes your internal staff or email filtering capabilities to know about these events. So to do that, CSC is the only company in the world that offers these comprehensive solution under one entity. This is very important because this means that you don't have to be dealing with several organizations, several companies to get the protection that you need to combat these type of scams. CSC offers a solution to this problem by combining the corporate domain portfolio management, the brand protection, fraud protection, and our world-class security operations center. This allows us to quickly identify what does not belong in your portfolio. We know if something was registered typo squatting your brands, we know that we can quickly identify this does not belong to my client's portfolio. It has to be analyzed. We pass it on to our team of analysts, and they process the information. They look at several data points with regards to that domain name, and then if they identify this as a threat, they immediately start mitigating the problem. They start contacting any of the third parties involved in this domain registration, and then we proceed to perform the removal of the domain name that is going to be used for fraud. In order to understand how TSC is able to detect these domain names that are used on these BEC scams, we need to understand what's the search model that we utilize at TSC. Typically, in the past, we used to rely on the use of regexes, which is a string of text that is going to be utilized as a filter to identify these domain names. And the problem with the regex is that if you don't have the correct regex properly configured, then you have a large chance of missing some of these new domain names or new techniques. So what we did at TSC is that we came up with a better model that utilizes machine learning technology, and it's going to allow us to detect all of these combinations of or possibilities of domain names that are going to typo squat your brand. As you can see on the screen, we have 5 models. One is called the fuzzy model, And what this one does is that it tries to identify domain names that are swapping a character or 2 characters or 3 characters to try to disguise the characters or the change on the string of text that is part of the domain name. In my example, I am showing that instead of saying CSC Global, one of the examples is changing an L for a 1 or a 0 for an O, and this is how they try to confuse the recipients of the email scans. The next one is called the homoglyphs, and this one preys on the ability or the ability of registering domain names that have that utilize international characters, meaning non-English characters. Recently, the ICANN made available to allow the registration of domain names utilizing non-English characters, and this one causes a huge problem for domain registrations because here you can use, characters with a tilde. You can use letters from the Cyrillic language, from Arabic, from Greek, from you name it. And this one expands the number of possibilities that you can register to try to mimic the domain names that belong to our customers. On my example there, I'm showing you CSC Global, but the first C has a tilde in it. So that's one of the examples of how they will utilize these international domain names to their advantage. The next one is called the next model is called the cousin domains, and this one is the ability to register domain names on different country code TLDs. So, for example, if we have cscglobal.com, people will try to register domain names in Ecuador, in Japan, in Argentina, and all of these other country codes that allow for domain registrations. And what we do at CSC is that we constantly keep checking for those domain names that should not exist on those TLDs. We try to see if someone registered. One of the hurdles on these front is that not all TLDs share their zone files publicly, but we have ways to go around it and identify these domain names. The next search model is called the homophones, and these are things are domain names that are not necessarily written the same way, meaning they're not using the same characters, but they are pronounced the same. So in my example there, I am showing CSC Global, how it will be written or pronounced in Spanish, for example. As you can see, it doesn't have the first 3 characters from CSC. Instead, it says CSC literally in that language. So that's one of the examples of how this homophone approach can also, we take advantage of this homophone approach to identify these domain names that could be registered to target your organization. And the typical question that I get on this one is, why will anybody do that? And the reason for that is because there are some cases where probably your customers don't necessarily know how the brand is written, and that's where scammers can prey on. Not the ignorance, but the confusion of your victims of your online users. Sorry, to identify how it's properly spelled. So this one, this search model identifies these possibilities and is able to detect them promptly. And the next one is called the keywords. With this model, what we are doing is that we combine any world event, any major trend that is happening online, to combine it, and we combine it with the keywords that belong to your brand. So, for example, in this case, I'm showing CSC Global mixed with COVID. What this is doing is that it's using the major world event of COVID-19, and it's combining it with the brand of our example here, cscglobalcovid.com. If you are not, if you're seeing how domain names registration happen, is that typically scammers, they will try to take advantage of anything that is happening. In the latest keyword that we saw spike in domain registration was vaccine. So let's pretend that your organization has a robust response to COVID, and the scammers identify this. They can say, for example, CSC has a robust anti-COVID program internally for their staff, and now they're going to register cscglobalcovid.com, and an email can come from there and say, hey, we're doing great with the program, but I need you to pay this invoice right away. Bam. That's how they can mix these terminologies or these terms that are trends on the internet and use them to attack your brand. Once our team has identified these domain names that are targeting your brand, what needs to happen is that we need to get rid of them, mitigate the problem, mitigate the threat. And to do this, CSC has a response team that will do the analysis on the domain name. They will identify that they will validate that it's a true positive, meaning that it's going to be used for fraud, that it is being used for fraud. It matches all of the characteristics that we have for a domain name that is going to be part of a VC scam or that is going to target your organization. And once we have the authorization to proceed from the customer, we do an analysis to identify where can we target this scam to get rid of it. Our team of analysts will identify which one is the quickest channel for us to get the content removed. We can go after the ISP, we can go after the domain registrar, we can even get rid of some of the DNS components of the domain name in order to make sure that it's not being used for fraud, and also it's not going to target your organization. Additionally, what CSC can do is that we can share this information of our detection with your team to alert your internal staff of what we have found. We have ways of sharing this information so that your internal email servers can blacklist these domain names and avoid getting the emails in the first place. And that's one of also the ways that CSC is able to remove the threat from hitting your organization. Once we identify the third parties involved, we'll proceed to contact them, present the information, present the proof that this is a malicious domain name, and then we will do it will go through the normal process. We keep monitoring until it gets fully removed. Once it's removed, we alert the client that it has been successfully removed from the internet, and after that, we put it on a monitoring queue for 90 days. And this is to make sure that it does not come back. There are some cases where the scam was just too good for scammers. It was just generating them a lot of money, and they tried to revive it. They tried to fight the registrar, they tried to fight the ISP company, or they tried to hop it or move it to another IP address. Our system will make sure that it's no longer being used by doing these post-mortem monitoring. So with that said, that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm very glad to, if you have any questions, to please direct them to me. And now I will pass it back to Tarek for the next slide. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fernando. That was a great presentation. All right, everyone. Now let's look at what's upcoming. Our next newsletter will send on April 23rd. For upcoming webinars, on April 14th, we have our Digital Certificate Automation webinar. On May 12th, we have Why Domains Are Central to Our Cybersecurity in German. On May 13th, we have our Next Industry Updates webinar. And on May 25th, we have Why Domains Are Central to Your Cybersecurity in Italian. And that's all the time that we have for today. If we didn't get to your question, we will contact you with a response after the webinar. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, and we hope to see you next time.